Looking at the 5 photos, my heart is racing. It's been 10 years since I last contacted my 5 childhood friends, Gary, Calvin, Eric, Edward, and Mike. Are we going straight to talking about marriage? Blushing, I repeatedly emphasized to my dad not to mention this matter. I refused to give them my number until I had considered it thoroughly. My dad laughed like a fool. It's okay, darling. No rush. Since the 5 of them go to the same school as you, when you reach university, you can take your time to choose. Suddenly, he created a group for selecting a husband and added me to it. In less than 5 minutes, my dad added 10 more people into the group. Looking at the names, it was my 5 childhood friends and their fathers. After the 5 uncles gave their sons words of encouragement, my dad said to me, "Dear daughter, your 5 uncles and I will leave now. The 6 of you, bond well and build your relationships." Watching the 6 people quickly leave the group, I typed a few ellipses and also exited. My dad apparently didn't know that I left the group and believed I was still in it. Whenever he asked me, I evaded the question. And so, the time came for university to begin. On the first day of school, after the rain, my dad wanted to drive me in his Maybach, but I declined. I grabbed a random suitcase and filled it with clothes before heading to school. 50 meters away from the school gate, I saw a group of people. Most of them were girls, surrounding 4 tall and handsome boys. When I saw those 4, I almost fainted. It was my 4 childhood friends. Only Eric was missing. Just then, my dad messaged me. "Irene, have you seen those 5 yet? Early this morning, they all came to tell me they'd pick you up. Thankfully, I noticed them early. If I walked over and ran into them, I'd become famous on my first day." I turned around quietly, found a classmate to ask about the north entrance gate, and then headed towards it with my luggage. As I reached the gate, a Rolls-Royce suddenly sped towards me and stopped abruptly by my side. It had passed over a puddle, splattering mud all over my legs and dirtying my white shoes. Feeling a bit annoyed, I grabbed the girl's arm who had just stepped out of the Rolls-Royce. Before I could say anything, there was a commotion from the crowd behind her. When I turned around, my mouth twitched in shock. Eric, my childhood friend who hadn't been at the main gate, was walking towards me. The faint light sprinkled upon him, giving his skin a radiant glow, softening his chiseled features. Even the dust floating around him seemed to become transparent. He reached me, smiled lightly, and naturally took the suitcase from my hand. Then, he looked at the girl. In that moment, the light in his eyes turned icy. He apologized to her, as if his previous smile at me was just an illusion. The girl's face turned pale. Eric repeated his apology, and she finally looked at me with a pitiful expression, her eyes turning red. Yes, she was sorry. I let go of the girl's hand, wanting to take my luggage back from Eric, but he had already moved ahead. "Let's go, Irene." Eric escorted me to the dormitory entrance, then took out his phone to add me as a friend. I hesitated for a moment before agreeing. After all, they were my childhood friends, all standing in front of me. It seemed unreasonable to refuse. Before he left, Eric ruffled my hair. "Irene, if you need anything, you can call me. I promise to be there whenever you need me." Eric was usually a man of few words, so how did he suddenly start to be so attentive? I felt it necessary to keep a bit of distance from him. Little did I know, fate had other plans. The girl who had stepped out of the Rolls-Royce turned out to be my roommate. When I pushed the door open, my 2 roommates were standing beside her like 2 maids, discussing Gary. "Oh my gosh, Christina, you're Gary's fiancé? I'm so lucky to be roommates with you. Christina. Can you take us to meet Gary sometime?" I always felt that Christina was not a good match for Gary. But now seeing Gary, I feel even more strongly that Christina is not the one for him. Gary had been out in the sun for a while, his lips a bit dry, but his smile was as warm as ever. He looked down at me, eyes crinkling with a smile. "Yeah, maybe I'm stubborn. Once I've made up my mind about someone, it never changes. What does Christina have that makes me a little jealous? And where did Eric come from all of a sudden?" He shot a meaningful glance at Gary before grinning at me. "Irene, how about having dinner with me?" Gary moved a step closer in my direction. I wasn't hungry either. "Gary, aren't medical students always busy and used to having an empty stomach? I have time now. But I don't want to treat you. What's going on?" Although we, the 5 childhood friends, used to have our disagreements, Gary was always the exception. With his gentle nature, he was always the one to mediate. But now, there seemed to be a spark between him and Eric. Now it was up to me to play the peacemaker. All right, how about I treat today?" And the 2 of them spoke at the same time. "No, Irene, you can't treat us. Their voices overlapped, their eyes locking in a silent understanding. I sighed helplessly. Fine, I'll treat. The three of us went to a nearby restaurant and ordered a few dishes. After lunch, they suggested showing me around the school, but I didn't dare agree. With the tension between them, I was afraid of being caught in the middle. I made up an excuse and slipped back to my dorm room. But there was no one in the dorm room, so I took a shower, changed clothes, napped for a bit, and then headed to the afternoon class meeting. I was a bit late. As soon as I walked in, all eyes turned towards me. The most piercing gaze came from Christina. I was puzzled. Yes, I had offended Christina, but when did I offend the whole class? As I found my seat, I heard sarcastic remarks from around me, and then it dawned on me. Somehow, someone had posted a photo of Gary and me on a school forum, insinuating that he was engaged to Christina. Everyone assumed that I was a shameless homewrecker. If I hadn't been involved, I would have wanted to confront that person too. I quickly passed the link to a hacker friend of mine. In less than 3 minutes, the identity of the person who posted the photo and fueled the comments was exposed. It turned out to be my 2 roommates. They were quick to apologize, but I gave them a choice: apologize or face the consequences. They paled, but with no other option, they obediently wrote apology letters and posted them online. Seeing the overwhelming support on the forum, I decided to let it go for now. The class meeting continued, and there was a segment for self-introductions. When Christina introduced herself, there was a buzz of excitement. She boasted about her parents' high-profile jobs and wealth. I couldn't help but smile when I saw this. Christina's fake engagement, her father's fake job, what else was fake about her? And then it was my turn to introduce myself. I decided to keep it simple. My dad works in construction, and my mom works at a company. My words sparked laughter in the room. After the meeting, I made a new friend, Kathy, from the neighboring dorm room. She shared a similar background with her father working in bricklaying. I even asked my dad to take care of her father at work. When we returned to the dorm, we were surprised to see a group of people gathered outside. Kathy went into the crowd and came back excited, saying that Gary, Eric, Edward, as well as 2 other popular students, were waiting outside. I sent a message to Eric asking them not to wait outside my dorm. But Eric was determined not to give up. So, I quickly escaped with Kathy, and we ended up having noodles at the cafeteria. While eating, Kathy showed me the forum. Christina had created quite a stir with her attempt to win back favor after the incident earlier. At night, when I returned to the dorm, Christina confronted me, accusing me of bad-mouthing her to Eric. She was very confrontational, but when I called her out on her behavior, she backed off. Christina, with her flashy lies, had finally been exposed, and the truth had set me free. However, harsh words have to be spoken. Irene, we're not finished yet. I don't care. Since the first time I stepped into this dorm room and saw Christina, I knew that my 4 years in college wouldn't be lonely. I chose to go to bed early to prepare for the freshman training the next day. Before sleeping, I sent a private message to Eric, asking him to tell the other 4 childhood friends not to come to the dorm. Keeping a low profile is the best strategy. Eric was not happy. I told them not to come, but they wouldn't listen. Irene, I know you're the one they want to see. So confident all of a sudden. Anyway, you guys are too conspicuous, so don't come looking for me in the future. I waited for 5 minutes before Eric replied. Okay. I will relay the message. I don't know why, but I feel like he's a bit unhappy. Next was the freshman training. I never expected Christina to be so bold, actually tripping me during the training. She was addicted to tattling. She would report on anything I did. After getting reported 3 times in a row, I was singled out and criticized. I had to run around the field 3 times alone as a punishment. The next day, Christina escalated things even further. If I sneezed, she would signal the teacher. Fine, you want 100 squats? Go ahead. That evening when I returned to lay on my bed, I angrily thought about how Christina would try to get back at me the next day. On the 3rd day, I didn't make any unnecessary moves, and I didn't even dare to sneeze. I could feel Christina's gaze burning on me like fire, as if she wanted to incinerate me. As the freshman training neared its end, she charged directly at me. She tackled me to the ground and said, "Teacher, Irene cursed at my mother." I was given an additional 2 hours of standing punishment. I was so exhausted that I had no energy to eat. When I returned to climb into bed, I realized Eric had added me to a group chat dedicated to protecting Irene. There were 6 members in the group, which naturally included me and my 5 childhood friends. I sent a few question marks their way. Irene, were you sleeping just now? We all know about the bullying you faced. How should we strike back? We will follow your lead. Watching the conversations of the five of them, all my fatigue and grievances from those days vanished in an instant. Memories of my childhood and playing with my 5 childhood friends flashed through my mind like a movie replay. Playing together with 6 little buddies, there were bound to be disputes. But even the most carefree Edward would still yield to me. Disputes were for them, and they would always unconditionally cherish me. Suddenly, I felt that the 10 years of separation hadn't created too much distance between us. The childhood memories of my childhood friends remained as they were. I sent a voice message with a smile, saying, "It's nothing. I can handle this minor issue myself. Once the freshman training is over, I'll treat you all to dinner." Mike cheered, "Yay. Irene is the best." Just as Mike's voice trailed off, Christina sitting across from me let out a sneer. Christina looked at me disdainfully. She had probably heard about people in college who thought they had some charm and would do anything for money. And she was hinting at me. But I knew better than to waste my time having a debate with her. In the next few days, I made sure Christina paid back what she owed me. The first thing was to have my dad use his connections to change my teacher. The second was to have a hacker check Christina's recent communication records to see if there was anything unusual. The results confirmed my suspicions. 3 days ago, Christina transferred 8,000 yuan. The recipient's name was David, the teacher who had helped her punish me. The next day when we met our new teacher, Christina's expression noticeably soured. But she kept up her bravado. "Irene, are you going to run or stand at attention today?" I ignored her. She tried various ways to provoke me. She told the teacher my hands were moving one moment, and the next she told him I was talking. In the quiet field, her constant tattling seemed out of place. The teacher's brow furrowed tighter and tighter until he finally kicked Christina out of the group. For repeatedly slandering her teammates and disrupting the team's order, she was punished with 5 laps. Left turn. Start running. Christina widened her eyes, but in the end had to run. As she had just run 1 lap and was nearing our squad, her legs gave out, and she fainted. The teacher was taken aback and quickly called 2 girls to help her to the medical room. But as she turned around, I clearly saw a smirk on her face. What a waste that Christina didn't pursue acting. When she returned, the teacher started teaching self-defense techniques. I thought Christina had perfect timing. The self-defense training took a little over a day, and the teacher had partners practice in pairs. I grabbed Christina's hand and gleefully chose her as my partner. And she became my live plaything during the practice. I manipulated her until she cried out in pain. By the 3rd move, tears were streaming down her face, and she even yelled for her mom. "No, Christina, you're not a little girl like me." In any case, I thoroughly enjoyed that sparring session. I dare say Christina, with her delicate skin, would be left with quite a few bruises. After the freshman training ended that day and we returned to the dorm, Christina cried bitterly. She called someone on her phone while crying about how she was being bullied and needed someone to back her up. After the call, she had a grim expression, gritted her teeth, and glared at me fiercely. "Irene, don't be too smug. You're so despicable, you'll surely face retribution." I looked at her knowingly. "Christina, no," and to stop. Christina was probably shocked by my gaze. She paused for a moment before haughtily retorting, "Irene, your dad is just a bricklayer. Who are you trying to scare?" I shrugged and ignored her, focusing on preparing for bed. The next morning, I could clearly sense a change in the atmosphere in our dorm. Due to what happened at the class meeting, Mary and Cindy hadn't been talking much in the dorm, but today, as if they had reverted to their behavior on the opening day, they were praising Christina fiercely. Complimenting her skincare products, perfume, and even her necklace. "Christina, how much did that necklace cost?" "Not much, just a 5-digit figure." I wasn't interested in Mary and Cindy's change of attitude. It was the last day of freshman training, and I was feeling a bit excited and anxious. After the training, I was about to meet my 5 childhood friends. I wondered if it would be awkward for the 6 of us sitting at a table together. As it turned out, I had worried needlessly. As I arrived at the school gate as per our agreement and stood shoulder to shoulder with the 5 others, a sense of both familiarity and strangeness that had been lost for a long time suddenly surged up from my heart. It felt like returning to the carefree and intimate moments of childhood. And I, Irene, had the world if I had these 5 childhood friends. With just one command, we could dominate all the other kids in the area. It was truly a wonderful feeling. Years had passed, but they hadn't widened the distance between us. It was just to make it better for each of us to appear in front of the other. Hey, everyone, long time no see. My timidity and awkwardness were completely gone, and I even regretted not meeting them sooner. Since I had set restrictions on adding friends via the group, after dinner, I took the initiative to add Gary, Calvin, Edward, and Mike. To be honest, it was truly a beautiful day. The only less beautiful thing was that as soon as I reached the door of the dorm room, all 5 of them coincidentally sent me a private message. Irene, was I the best one tonight? How else could I respond? In order not to make them feel unfair, I gave the same answer to my 5 childhood friends. Just then, Kathy came out from the next room. When she saw me, her expression was a little strange. "What's up?" Kathy came over and asked in a low voice. "Irene, I saw you on the school forum. How did you end up hanging out with the school's 5 top guys?" "Just a little friendship, having a meal together." Kathy probed further. "Is that all?" "Yes, that's all." Relieved, Kathy smiled and said, "I wanted to find you after the freshman training today, but you left too quickly for me to catch up. My dad got a raise, and he's coming to see me tomorrow. Would you come with me? I'll let my dad treat you to dinner. It looks like Uncle has good connections." I nodded, agreeing, "Sure, no problem." Back in the dorm room, Christina launched into her usual sarcastic remarks. "Irene, don't think you're all that great for having dinner with Gary and those 5 friends. You're only hanging out with Eric because of your dad's connections. Without Eric, you're nothing." I didn't bother responding to her. Christina kept escalating her insults. "Irene, if I were you, I would distance myself from Eric. Your dad's just a bricklayer, and you and Eric are worlds apart. Just you wait, reality will hit you hard." Watching her, I simply quoted, "Christina, people should know when to stop." Christina seemed taken aback by my gaze, and she paused for a moment before finally retorting with a hint of arrogance, "Irene, your dad is just a bricklayer. Who are you trying to scare?" I shrugged and ignored her, focusing on preparing for bed. I noticed something was wrong from Christina's words. But I didn't think she could harm me in any way, so I didn't pay much attention. Therefore, when she stood in front of me, arrogantly demanding money, I couldn't help but laugh. Christina's triumphant expression faded a bit. "Irene, why are you laughing? You stole my skincare products, you stole my necklace, you must pay." When the class resumed, I was the last one to arrive. As soon as I walked in, Christina accused me. She said I stole her skincare products worth thousands of dollars and her necklace worth $50,000. I asked Christina, "Is this what you meant by a heavy blow?" A hint of triumph flashed in Christina's eyes, but she pretended not to understand clearly. "Irene, what are you talking about?" "I don't understand. I just want you to pay up." "No money." Christina seemed to anticipate my response. "I have already informed the class teacher. Irene, either pay up or drop out. It's your choice. I didn't choose." When the teacher arrived, I calmly made a suggestion. "Let's call the police." Christina said I used her cosmetics, so there must be my fingerprints on them. Christina seemed a bit panicked. "There's no need to call the police. We all saw you using my cosmetics." I chuckled. "Christina, that's just eyewitness testimony. What about physical evidence? You can't convict solely based on someone's word, right?" The teacher, being a smart person, listened to Christina's words and his gaze changed. Seizing the opportunity, I presented the evidence of Christina bribing the teacher. Christina was completely panicked. "Irene, I'm sorry. You didn't use my skincare products, and my necklace is not missing. Can you forgive me?" I sneered. "Why didn't you say these things earlier?" I don't have time to waste with Christina. Kathy is still waiting for me. Her dad invited us for dinner today. As Kathy and I walked towards the school gates, I received a text message from my dad. He mentioned that he had some free time and wanted to take me out for lunch, inviting 5 of my childhood friends as well. When we reached the gates, my dad appeared wearing casual clothes and slippers, smiling happily. Despite his unassuming appearance, who would have thought he was a well-known tycoon on the list? Even the clothes he wore were custom-made from 5 years ago, faded and not replaced. I introduced my dad to Kathy, who immediately greeted him warmly. My dad nodded with a smile and then pinched my face. "Daughter, you've lost weight. Is everything okay?" "Dad, how come you're here?" My dad was usually hands-on with his projects and rarely had leisure time during these hours. "Isn't it because I missed you so much?" "You never call your old man." At that moment, my dad looked towards the school gates. The 5 guys were approaching. "Daughter, have you made your choice?" I tugged at my dad's sleeve. "My classmate is still here." Soon, the 5 childhood friends stood before me. From a distance, they already looked handsome. But as they got closer, it was clear that they were not only handsome but also impeccably dressed. Gary styled his hair, Calvin wore a suit, Eric had a watch, Edward wore a small tie, and Mike smelled great. What's more, they were all very charming. "Uncle, you're looking more handsome each time." "Oh, it's been years, but I've been really missing you, Uncle. I never expected my childhood friends to be so flattering towards my dad." I looked at Kathy. "We have more people here, I'll pay later." Kathy's gaze shifted away from the five guys, her face slightly blushing. She shyly shook her head, insisting that her dad got a raise and could afford the meal. I agreed, thinking I couldn't let her dad pay for the meal later. Kathy received a call, probably from her dad. She asked him to add more dishes, and after hanging up, she pointed to a nearby restaurant. "My dad has already ordered the food there. Let's go." We entered the restaurant and were escorted to a private room. In the room, there was a man dressed in faded work clothes, with dark skin, of average build, who looked honest and reliable. When the door opened, he quickly looked over and stood up politely to greet us. But as soon as he saw my dad, his expression changed. He looked at my dad and said, "Boss?" Kathy was puzzled. "Kathy, this is the boss of cooperation that your dad mentioned. He's the reason your dad got a raise." During the meal, my 5 childhood friends were very attentive. They served me chicken legs, scooped soup, and handed me tissues. I didn't see them as 5 handsome guys in front of me, but as 5 peacocks. After seeing off my dad and Mr. Tao, I saw the 5 of them sigh in resignation. "Can we tone it down a bit in front of my dad?" I scolded jokingly. They all responded in unison, "No way." With a sly look in their eyes as they glanced at each other. Without saying a word, tension filled the air. Calvin said, "There's only one wife, if you don't try hard, you'll lose it." Who would have thought that they wanted me to choose one of them to marry? After parting ways with the 5 of them, Kathy asked me about it. "Irene, what was all that with the 5 handsome guys just now?" I didn't hide anything from Kathy as a friend. They are my childhood friends, but I haven't seen them in a long time. They are all potential future husbands my dad arranged for me. I held Kathy's hand. "Oh, and don't let it slip that my dad, let people think my dad is a laborer, it's better." Soon, I pushed open the door to the dormitory. Christina was seated in the middle of the bench, with an air of a haughty queen. Next to her was a suitcase, which belonged to me. Looking at my bed, it was already in a mess, my books piled up in plastic bags. As soon as Christina saw me, she beckoned with her hand, "Throw Irene's stuff out. Our dormitory doesn't welcome this kind of trash." Mary and Cindy immediately smiled as they threw my things out of the door. The suitcase made a dull sound, the lock was broken, and my clothes tumbled out. Other dormitory residents gathered around, watching the scene, with many of them pulling out their phones to record. Only Kathy bent down to help me pick up my clothes. "Kathy, don't pick them up, whoever made the mess should pick them up." I stopped Kathy, but my words evidently had no threat to Christina. "Irene, who are you trying to scare? Why don't you try talking to the teacher again? Are you reminding me that the teacher is also on my side?" I took out my phone and chose to call the police. Christina sneered at this. "Irene, do you think I'm ignorant of the law? For illegal damage to someone's property, the amount has to be over $5,000 to file a case. Do you even have $500? I remained cold and silent. "Christina, just wait to be detained." I called the manager of the brand's counter and asked him to come over. The police and the brand manager arrived together. The manager confirmed that the suitcase was authentic, leaving everyone dumbfounded. Christina's eyes widened in shock. "Is this really last year's limited edition? How is that possible?" Christina was incredulous and stared directly at me. "Irene, your dad is just a poor laborer. Can you afford this suitcase? Let me guess, you hooked up with a sugar daddy, didn't you?" I was indignant. Dirty people see everything as dirty. Christina tried to shift the blame again. "Irene, your suitcase wasn't thrown by me. Even if you want someone to pay for it, you shouldn't have come to me." Mary and Cindy's faces darkened. They probably didn't expect to be betrayed by Christina for the second time. The two looked at each other and then pounced on Christina, scratching at her face. "Christina, don't you have any shame? Why are you blaming everything on us?" The 3 of them quickly became entangled in a fight. When the police separated them, they all had bruises on their faces. Of course, Christina suffered the most severe injuries as she was up against 2 people. After the police finished their investigation, I retrieved my belongings and spent nearly an hour tidying up my bed that Christina had messed up. After the afternoon class ended, Kathy told me that Eric had made a post. He exposed Christina's identity. It turned out that Christina wasn't actually from a wealthy background. Her brother worked as a chauffeur for a tycoon. The chauffeur when school began was her brother, and all the luxury items she flaunted were stolen from their employer's house while he was away. Investigations were underway, and her brother faced several years in prison. What else could I say? Interestingly, Eric used this incident as leverage. Irene, I've been doing so well, can I have a reward? Eric, how can a pure and cold high mountain flower like you say such things? I joked with disdain but was honest with him. What reward do you want? Tomorrow is Saturday, I'll take you to a hot spring resort in the countryside. How about that? In my mind, an embarrassing image of me and Eric soaking in a hot spring pool floated in. It seemed a bit embarrassing. My face blushed a bit. All right, let's go to the hot spring resort. If Eric could flaunt his figure even in clothes and not care, why should I? At 10 o'clock the next morning, Eric picked me up and we headed to the hot spring hotel. We arrived around 11:30. After settling into the hotel for a while, it was time for lunch when we came out. To my surprise, when Eric and I walked into the lobby side by side, everyone was stunned. At the round table to the right, 4 young men were waving at us, smiling. Gary smiled warmly. Irene, you're not behaving. Edward raised an eyebrow. What happened to fair competition? Calvin grinned. Eric, trying to steal Irene secretly. Wishful thinking. Mike blinked at me. Irene, my physique is not inferior to Eric's. How did things turn out like this? I walked slowly over and took a seat. Looking at the table full of delicious food, I suddenly felt a bit tasteless. And the terrifying part was yet to come. Have you ever seen a group of 5 handsome men in a hot spring pool, slightly showing off their charms? I stood by the hot spring pool, draped in a bath towel, looking at the 5 men inside, hesitant to dip my feet in. All 5 pairs of eyes were staring at me eagerly, seeking an answer. Who was the most handsome among them? I still hadn't called my dad. Running away from problems was not my style. Gary and I had been childhood friends with the 5 of them. I felt the need to guide them, to lead them back to the path of childhood friends. In the evening, I knocked on each of their doors one by one. When I found Mike, he seemed hesitant. Irene, have you chosen me? Mike said, his eyes moist. Irene, you don't know, I've liked you for many years. Since you were a little bean, I've liked you. I've wanted to steal you and make you my wife for a long time. I then found Calvin. And even Calvin expressed his feelings. Irene, haven't you noticed how deeply rooted my feelings are for you all these years? And then there was Edward. Irene, I have always liked you, cherishing you as my wife. As for Gary and Eric, I decided to give up immediately. Unexpectedly, both of them confessed their feelings to me one after another. Gary texted me, I've always liked you. Remember what I said? The person I set my sights on never changes. Eric knocked on my door, then walked in. It was rumored that they all confessed to me. How could he be left out? He was taller than me, looking down at me with a depth of emotion in his usually cool eyes. Irene, if I am the one standing by your side in the end, that would be my greatest blessing. After the 2-day trip to the hot spring hotel, my dark circles had worsened. For the first time, I really liked the small bed in my room. It allowed me to focus on my thoughts and not think about my 5 childhood friends. In the midst of it, I heard Kathy's voice in a daze. She mentioned my 3 roommates. Christina had dropped out of school. Her family had depended on her brother to support them, but now that her brother was gone, they blamed Christina and wanted her to come back home to get married. As for Mary and Cindy, they had changed departments. But their reputations were only slightly better than Christina's, so changing departments couldn't save their image. Kathy's words made me sigh. Those 3 didn't even deserve the chance to open their eyes. When I woke up, my phone was filled with messages from my 5 childhood friends expressing their concerns for me, all sincere and heartfelt. I couldn't help but sigh. What's wrong? Kathy's voice came from below, and that's when I noticed there was someone else in the room. Kathy smiled and explained that she had changed rooms to keep me from feeling lonely, hoping to surprise me, but I ended up coming back and falling asleep immediately. Sorry. Kathy noticed my tired look and asked me what was wrong with concern. I had been struggling with the situation with my 5 suitors and couldn't find anyone to confide in. Kathy's voice seemed to release the pent-up feelings within me, allowing me to open up about everything. And since she had met my childhood friends at dinner, telling her didn't seem like a big deal. After I finished, Kathy seemed a bit shocked. So, they all confessed to you? I nodded. Irene, if I were you, I wouldn't know who to choose either. You are so lucky, aren't you? They are the 5 male gods of our school, and not one of them can be pursued, but you have 5 of them at once, and they are all so nice. I joked, are you here to cool me down or add fuel to the fire? Kathy just smiled without saying anything. From then on, my relationship with my 5 childhood friends remained the same. When we were together, it felt like we were still childhood friends. But in private, they would show their feelings and try to test my choice. After about 2 months passed, there suddenly was a scandal online about me and my 5 childhood friends. More precisely, it was about pictures from the hot spring. Although we were all wearing swimsuits in the hot spring photos, I was the only girl among them, leading to rumors and misunderstandings. How shameless could the students be these days? I looked at the photos, deep in thought. These were the photos I had personally taken at the hot spring hotel, including group pictures with my childhood friends and selfies. So, who posted these photos online? I requested a hacker to investigate the IP address. The results shocked me. It was from my own dorm room. Could it be that I betrayed myself? Sitting on the bed, lost in thought for a while, my gaze gradually shifted to Kathy's bed across from mine. Could it be Kathy? I really didn't want to suspect Kathy. After all, she was the first friend I made when I started college. She was gentle, understanding, and genuinely kind. But I had someone make the news disappear and delete all the pictures online. Although there were still some rumors going around, the discussion had decreased significantly. Whether it was because of this incident or not, there were gradual changes happening between me and my 5 childhood friends. Our lively little group suddenly became quiet, and my childhood friends no longer actively reached out to me. Of course, when I asked, they would respond briefly. Most importantly, our weekly dinner gatherings with the 6 of us had stopped. I started feeling restless. That night in the dorm, I asked Kathy about the situation. Kathy smiled and said, "Oh, Irene, don't overthink it. You've known each other for so many years, how could they suddenly change?" I shook my head and said, "I'll go ask Eric myself tomorrow. I swear, it's not just me being oversensitive." Kathy's expression changed slightly, and then she said, "All right, fine. Let me be honest. Irene, isn't your birthday this Friday?" The 5 of them privately found me and said they wanted to surprise you with a party. The current atmosphere is just to set the mood. I felt relieved. That made sense. My pent-up feelings from the past few days suddenly dissipated. Since high school, I hadn't had high expectations for my birthday. But this time, for some reason, I was really looking forward to it. Time flew by, and my 19th birthday arrived quietly. Kathy gave me an address, saying that my 5 childhood friends would be waiting there for me. It wasn't far, just a 20-minute taxi ride away. The destination was a suburban villa. But as I stepped inside the villa, a dark figure suddenly lunged towards me. "Hurry up! What are you all standing around for? Pin her down!" The voice was so familiar. I struggled to look up and saw Christina. Along with Christina were 2 maids in the room who tied me up and gagged me. Seemingly understanding my confusion, Christina raised her hand and slapped me across the face. "Irene, tell me, why is our fate so different? Why were you born into a wealthy family? Why do you have Gary and the others protecting you? Why?" Christina scolded me and started crying. It turns out, she had been married for a month now. Her husband was 52, even older than her father. And the old man was a domestic abuser, often verbally and physically abusing her. Christina showed me the scars on her body, horrifying marks crisscrossing all over. "So Irene, all of this is because of you." I looked at her quietly and sighed. Kathy was there too. As soon as I finished speaking, Kathy emerged from a room on the right side of the living room. "Irene, you guessed right, it was me." Disappointed, I asked her, "Why, Kathy?" She responded matter-of-factly, "Why? No reason, I just hate the rich. In this world, rich people disgust me the most. Irene, things we dare not even think about, but you still want more. You're truly insufferable." I asked her, "So, the photos of me at the hot spring hotel were also posted online by you, right?" "Exactly." Kathy laughed. "Irene, don't blame me. Who told you to sleep so soundly? It was so easy to unlock your phone password." I shook my head, "But I don't understand why you did this. I just wanted everyone to think you were a bad person, so when the same thing happened later, no one would find it strange." Kathy walked over to Christina, patted her shoulder. "Come on, let's take her to your old man and take some indescribable photos." Christina's eyes lit up. She came over wanting to tear my clothes off. I raised my foot and kicked her in the stomach, then got up and ran towards the door. But Kathy caught me and brought me back. Irene, no one will save you. Not even your 5 childhood friends. I looked at her with a smile. Kathy, actually I've been waiting for a chance for someone to know the truth. My dad always says, don't doubt someone without reason. But it's also important to be cautious. I had recorded everything Kathy had just said. She tarnished my innocence, and I would make her personally clear my name. Kathy's face changed, and at the same time, the door was kicked open by someone. My 5 childhood friends and the police rushed in one after another. The scene was chaotic, but in the end, Christina and Kathy were taken away by the police. 3 days later, the police issued a statement. The news outlet I had already arranged came out and released the news, proving my innocence and that of my 5 childhood friends. My background was also exposed. In the sunlight, I would never be the one who leaned on others. I just looked at the handsome faces of my 5 childhood friends and blinked. So, can we be lifelong childhood friends? Let's forget about getting married, okay? No, Irene, you must choose one. All right, after circling back and forth, the most difficult question has returned to the beginning. So, among my 5 childhood friends who are also my fiancés, who should I choose in the end?